Hi, welcome to History Talks. I'm your host, Will, and this is Sebastian. Today we are going to begin our series on the Crusades. In this episode, we'll be focusing on the First Crusade. So, Sebastian, what caused the First Crusade?
To understand the causes of the First Crusade, we need to understand one thing mainly, along with some smaller things: the fall of the Byzantine Empire. Now, the Byzantine Empire, it still exists at this point. This is the 11th century we're talking about. But ever since the 1030s, the Seljuk Turks, which have recently conquered Persia and have started dominating the Middle East, have been having border skirmishes with the Byzantines, who at this point controlled Greece, Anatolia, and some other parts of the Balkans. Um, However, in 1071, the Seljuks made a decisive victory at the Battle of Manzikert, where they captured the Roman Emperor Romanos IV after his heir apparent deserted him and the Cumanian mercenaries betrayed him. After this battle came a series of Seljuk invasions in which the Seljuk Turks conquered Jerusalem from the Fatimids and all of Anatolia from the Byzantines. Now, both of these were problematic for the Latin Christians of the West, uh, the who had the two problems were: one, now that the Byzantine Empire, which had been considered the bulwark of Christendom, now that it was, massively defeated by this Muslim force, that's a threat, especially when the capital of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople, is the economic center of the known world, at least for the Middle East and Europe. In addition, them taking Jerusalem from the Fatimids, whereas the Fatimids had continued the Arab policy of saying, okay, you can go on pilgrimages to Jerusalem, but you need to pay a tax. The Seljuks were just like, no, we're just going to harass you if you go on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So this, along with some improving military technology, full plate armor and longswords and whatnot, inspires Pope Urban II to start thinking about the idea of a mass military pilgrimage, as he calls it, to against the Muslims.
Okay. So just to recap what you just spoke about there. What year are we talking about right now?
So the Battle of Manzikert is 1071, and
1071.
Yeah,
So this is all happening in the 1070s. Is that correct?
yeah.
Okay, so 1070s, we have Christendom has lost control over its economic center. Is that correct?
Or it's on the verge of.
Okay, Christendom is about to lose the city, the port that it is its center of economic activity.
Yeah.
At the same time, Christians also want to travel to Jerusalem,
Yeah,
for religious reasons on pilgrimages. Mm-hmm. They are being attacked for doing that. They are being persecuted. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you also have within Christendom, so within Europe,
mm-hmm.
Military technology has improved.
Yeah.
So there is an opportunity to push back against both the economic or impending economic damage and the religious persecution. There's an opportunity to push back via military force. And the Pope at that time recognizes this. I'm sure there's others who recognize it.
Yeah.
But the Pope at that time recognizes it. So then what happens next?
So the points where this turns full on to Crusade is shortly after the Kingdom of Castile manages to capture some forts in Iberia, and the Seljuks, they make it all the way to the west coast of Anatolia. Alexios Komnenos, the emperor of the Byzantines, he sends emissaries to Rome, and they have a council in the city of Clermont, called the Council of Clermont. There, the emissary requests help from the Western Christians in taking back Byzantine territory from the Seljuks. This is all the provocation Urban II needs to finally get this, whole crusade idea off the ground. So in 1095, Urban II sends preachers all throughout Europe to preach military pilgrimage to take up the cross, or croisade as it was called in French, and to join forces with the Byzantines in a great military, great war against the Seljuks.
Okay, but at this point, so when the Pope does this call, are there a lot of willing participants who want to leave their home? They want to travel all the way across to the other side of the Eastern Mediterranean. Are there a lot of willing participants?
Yes. While the Pope intended for the main participants to be, knights, interestingly, even more than the knights were excited the peasantry.
So a lot of peasants wanted to sign up.
Yeah, the reasons are not clear since most peasants were illiterate, but they were very excited, and there was one man known as Peter the Hermit who was so excited that instead of leaving at a time when they would arrive in Anatolia in spring, like the Pope had intended, Peter the Hermit was just like, alright, we're making our own Crusader army of peasants, lesser knights, whatever, and we're going to take Jerusalem ourselves. So Peter the Hermit, along with this other guy named William, they just gathered these mobs of people from Germany, France, wherever, especially Germany, and they marched out through Hungary to the Byzantine Empire. Except the Byzantines are confused because, as far as they knew, the Crusader army was not supposed to come for another year. But Peter is excited, and he manages to get his army across the Bosphorus, at which point he is almost immediately defeated by the Seljuks. So, and this event is called the People's Crusade. So the People's Crusade, it tries to feed itself by, pillaging the land, but it's a disorganized mob of people with no military training or experience. So the People's Crusade doesn't really do anything except for make the Seljuks think, I guess the Byzantines have really lowered their standards for mercenaries. Because one interesting thing to note that will come up later is that most Muslims weren't aware of the Pope's calls for crusades. So as far as they were concerned, the Byzantines were doing what they had done before, which was hire Latin mercenaries.
Okay.
So anyways.
Okay, so this peasant army marches.
Yeah.
The Muslims see them.
Yeah.
And do they go to battle with them? Or do they see them marching toward their territory? Or
they land in Anatolia, they start marching towards the Muslims, and the Muslims sweep them aside.
Sweep them aside. They are able to easily defeat this army of peasants who's untrained. They probably have inferior weapons. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so so what happens there?
So after the embarrassment that is the People's Crusade, in 1096, sometimes called the Prince's Crusade, but more commonly known as just the First Crusade.
Okay. So the Peasants' Crusade there is a precursor. That's not even considered the First Crusade. That is before the First Crusade.
Yeah, because while it was inspired by the same call to crusade, it was separate from the actual, church organized, military pilgrimage. Okay. It was its own thing.
All right.
So anyways, the actual crusade meets up in Constantinople in 1096. There are a few different commanders, but the main ones that are important for our story are Ademar, a bishop who is supposed to lead the entire Crusader army, Raymond de Toulouse, who is this French noble who has gained quite a bit of respect. He's 55 at this point, and he expects, okay, I'm just going to be the main noble leader of the crusade, and I'm going to get all the glory. There's a guy named Godfrey de Bouillon, another French noble, though not as prestigious. Though he brings along his younger brother Baldwin. Baldwin, originally everyone thought Baldwin was going to become a priest because, he was the youngest son in a large family. There was no way he was going to inherit. But instead, Baldwin decided to try to carve his own destiny by marrying a princess from the county of Verdun, though he never ended up inheriting Verdun, and instead just joins the Crusader army. So they meet in Constantinople. Alexios Komnenos in order to ensure that the crusade benefits the Byzantine Empire instead of just just starting some random state somewhere. Alexios Komnenos, he has all of the Crusader lords swear an oath to him before he allows them to cross the Bosphorus. He has them take an oath to say, we will return any formerly Byzantine territory that we capture to the Byzantine Empire. And Alexios Komnenos says, great, I'll help you if you ever need it, but here's the boats to cross the Bosphorus, go on your way. So the Crusaders land in Anatolia, and at first, there is no army that meets them. For a while, there is no army that meets them, because... So the Sultan...
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
There's no army that meets them. Is that something they expected? Was their landing a surprise? Or did they arrive there and say, "What? There's nobody here to meet us. What's going on? Is this a trap?"
They expected that there would be at least some Seljuk army, but
there's nothing.
Yeah, they were suspicious, but they carried on.
Okay.
As it turns out, what actually happened was the Sultan of the Sultanate of Rum, the Seljuk Sultanate in Anatolia, he, after seeing the disastrous People's Crusade, he was like, okay, whatever they're throwing at us, it's no threat. I can go focus on my conflict with the Fatimids and the other Seljuk sultans.
Okay.
So because of this, the Crusaders are free to march to the major Seljuk fort / capital of the Sultanate of Rum.
So that first wave, that peasants' army, really helped them because the Muslims in this case saw that, thought they essentially got arrogant. They said, "Oh, Christendom, what are they going to send? A bunch of peasants who don't know how to fight? We don't have to worry about them. We'll focus on other things." Then they show up with a professional army, a well-armed, trained professional army. They show up. There's no resistance. And what's going to happen next? I'm assuming they're going to take their enemy by surprise.
Yeah. So basically, the first target for the crusading army is Nicaea. Nicaea is an important city because it's a large city. It's got a major fort, and it's the capital of the Sultanate of Rum, home to the Sultan's family and some of his treasury. And it's also historically important because it's where the Council of Nicaea was held, where they hammered out the Nicene Creed. So the Crusaders start to lay siege to the city. Khalid Arslan hears that there's an actual army besieging his city, so he's like, all right, let me finish up this battle, and then I'm going to take my cavalry over there and deal with it. So he arrives near the siege, sees the size of the army and how well armored they are, and then immediately turns around to get reinforcements. This raises the morale of the Crusaders. Though the Crusaders have a major problem. Nicaea is on a lake. So that means that the siege goes nowhere because even though the Crusaders can easily blockade all of the landed parts of Nicaea, the lake next to Nicaea, the Celtics can resupply from there.
How big is this lake?
It's massive,
Okay,
like so big that there's no way
sea.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there's no way they can't just walk around it.
Or like they can't.
There may be a port on the other side of this lake that supplies can be brought in from.
Yeah.
Through boat. Okay.
Yeah. So the plan they come up with to counter this giant lake is basically the Byzantines bring their navy, or part of their navy. They get some like logs and then roll the boats on those logs into the lake so that they can then take the city by surprise. And eventually, the city surrenders to Alexius Komnenos. The Byzantine army is the Byzantines only sent 2,000 troops to capture the city, but the city decided to surrender to them. Some internal documents reveal that the Byzantines had basically said, "Hey, it's between us and that massive army, and we're going to spare the royal family of the Seljuks and allow them to, return to the and allow you to keep your stuff if you surrender to us to doubly make sure that the Crusaders keep their oath." And the guards are like, "All right, that sounds good."
Okay.
So Nicaea falls, and
falls or it's taken.
Or it's taken.
But yeah, okay. Because when I think of falls, I think of they burn the city to the ground. So they take it.
Yeah.
Who takes it specifically? The Byzantines?
Yes.
Okay, the Byzantines take it. It's now under their control.
Yeah.
Okay.
So next they start marching down the road. When on the road to the next fortress, the Seljuks, with about modern estimates say 6,000 to 8,000. Medieval estimates are like ridiculously high, but it was common practice back in the medieval era to overly inflate your enemy's numbers because if you win, then yay, we won a heroic victory, and if you lose, it was just overwhelming numbers.
That's interesting. And do you know how that's calculated? Like when they say the numbers are inflated, is it because there is some written account that says, oh, there was this army of 50,000 we defeated, but then they go and look at some kind of archaeological evidence like grave sites or bones from the area, and then they say, well, it was probably much smaller. Is that how that is determined?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because most Christian sources say, oh, they had 150,000, and most Muslim sources say, oh, we cannot even supply that amount.
Okay, so there's a discrepancy in numbers, and then there may be archaeological evidence that's looked at as well, too.
Yeah.
And then that's all pieced together to try to come up with a true number.
Yeah.
And then you also have, even modern historians have all sorts of biases. So they have all sorts of reasons why they may try to inflate or deflate certain numbers to fit into a narrative that they're trying to push.
Yeah.
But you're saying you think that the actual number was somewhere around 6,000 or 8,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, anyways, the Celtics, they send their horse archers to attack one of the Crusader armies, and even though they had some sense that there might be an ambush, the Seljuks are able to strike with a lot of ferocity, but then also successfully use hit and run tactics that allow them to even more quickly retreat should the Crusaders ever draw their swords. So it's hard for this segment of the army to deal with the Seljuks. But then another segment of the army comes and crashes into the Seljuk side. And this weakens the Seljuks. However, the Seljuks are still dealing, decent amounts of casualties to the Crusaders. So the Seljuks are starting to get more and more aggressive, hoping they can eventually push the Crusaders back. But then the largest portion of the Crusader army finally arrives at this part of the road. they sweep around the Seljuks and encircle them and defeat them and force Khalij Arslan to retreat. So Khalij Arslan is like, oh boy, this is a serious threat. So he decides, all right, we're going to use scorched earth tactics to make sure that the Crusaders, can't feed their army, and then I'm going to go deal with the fact that the Fatimids are about to capture Jerusalem from me. So he does this, and the Crusaders are now taking heavy attrition. They have some help from some of the local Christians that live there, but the Crusaders are still being dragged down by all of this hunger, reducing their numbers by the time they get to the next fortress, Antioch. Antioch, once again, is important, being a major port city, and is also historically important as it's the first city to become majority Christian by most Christian accounts. So
the first city anywhere, or the first city in that region,
or the first major city.
First major city in all of history. So this this is a little off topic from the First Crusades, but do you know when that happened?
Sometime in like the first or second century.
First or second century.
Like during the life of Saint Peter.
Okay. All right. So anyway, back to the Crusades.
Yeah. So so the Crusaders they besiege the city and eventually they manage to scale the walls of one of the city's citadels, and despite taking heavy losses, they manage to capture that citadel. But now that they've taken control of the city, they're low on numbers, starved, and there's another Muslim army coming for them. This Muslim army is run by the governor of Aleppo, and this governor, he is ambitious and has dreams of carving out a kingdom or sultanate in modern day Syria. So he tells the emir of Antioch, hey, if you give me your city, I will relieve it from the besieging Crusaders. So the emir agrees, and though the Muslim army does not arrive until the city has already been taken. But the governor is like, well, I can besiege the city. I mean, I outnumber them by a lot. So he surrounds the city walls and begins for siege. And Crusader morale is low because they're starving. But then this guy named, this just regular soldier named Peter supposedly gets a vision from St. Andrew telling him where the location of the Holy Lance is, the relic that's basically the spear that pierced Jesus after he died on the cross to let out the fluids. So he gets this vision, and shortly after they dig up a spear that looks like how the Holy Lance is supposed to have been described in one of the churches in the city of Antioch. Now the leaders of the crusade are skeptical, to say the least, of that this is the Holy Lance. Most skeptical is Ademar, who knows it's not the actual Holy Lance because they already have the actual Holy Lance in Rome. But this doesn't stop the Crusader morale from rising because, oh boy, the vision came true. Oh boy, we have a relic. So with Peter bearing the
well, wait. If we stop right there, the relic that they found. How do we know that was not the actual spear, and the one that was already in Rome was not the correct, or not the true one?
Well,
do we know that for sure, or we're just saying we're making that assumption?
We're making that assumption.
Okay.
But the sphere will be discredited in a weird way later on.
Okay, so it will be the one that was found during the First Crusade will be discredited later. Is it through some sort of scientific test that was done?
Nah, they just do like a trial by ordeal. We'll get to that.
Okay,
we'll get to that.
All right, we'll get to that.
That happens later on.
How far into the First Crusade are we? And the reason I'm asking is whether we need to do 2 episodes.
So we're almost done. After this, we're just going to talk about how they defeated this Muslim army, how they the siege of Arca, the siege of Jerusalem, and then the conclusion.
Okay, good. Yeah, because we're at about 25 minutes now, so if we want to keep this to around 30 minutes, and that's good. We'll just keep going, and we'll wrap up this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at first, the Crusaders are expecting a relief from the Byzantine forces. However, one of the commanders, Stephen de Blois, is like, "All right, you know what? We're doomed. I'm out of here." So he goes back and the Byzantine relief army is marching there, but then they meet Stephen, who says, "Nope, we're about to be destroyed. It's over." So Alexios Komnenos is like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll just secure the holdings I already have." So now that the Byzantine army is not on their way to relieve Antioch, Baldwin says, well, if he broke his oath to us to help us, then I guess we don't have to follow our oath to him to give him back his land. So Antioch is my city now. And the Crusaders agree to give the city to Baldwin, even though originally Raymond thought he was going to get everything. However, you can see, especially in the Gesta Francorum, one of the main primary sources for the First Crusade from the Christian perspective, you see after that battle on the road to Antioch, Baldwin has just been increasing in popularity for whatever reason. He's started leading more and more armies. Tales speak of his deeds.
Well, he's been successful in leading armies, right? So that would explain why his popularity has been increasing.
Yeah. So, anyways, after the discovery of the Holy Lands, Baldwin leads a charge against the Muslim army, and the charge, despite all odds, was successful. In fact, some chroniclers report that the soldiers reported seeing ghosts of the saints, like of Saint Andrew and others, riding with them, fighting the Saracens. So, anyways, they drive back the armies, partially because all the commanders of the Muslim army are not very happy with the governor who's leading the army, because they know he's trying to take over all of their land. So they
they have internal conflict here.
Yeah.
They believe that their own governor, who is supposed to be their leader, is somehow perhaps using them or trying to weaken them by throwing them into the battle with the Crusaders, which when they are in a weakened state, he can then take power from them. Is that what they suspect is happening?
Yeah.
Okay, so they pull back and say, we're not going to fight for you. We don't trust you.
Yeah, so these armies retreat. The Muslim army is defeated, and the Crusaders win. And with high morale from this stunning victory, they march down south to Jerusalem. First, they stop at Arca. It's a random castle. They really don't need to take it, but Raymond is insistent that they take it.
They don't need to, but what is it? They believe they have supplies there.
Or
they believe they could be used as a point by the enemy to attack them.
That, and also Baldwin thinks he might be able to weaken the Emir of Tripoli if he is able to take this castle, because this castle is part of the Emirate of Tripoli.
Okay.
So the siege goes nowhere, and during the siege, someone is like, Peter, I know for a fact that's not the Holy Lands. So we're going to have a trial by ordeal to prove whether you are a false prophet or not. And so the trial happens, and Peter dies, so they discredit the Holy Lands.
By trial by ordeal means they fight.
Or they or the
They
way
fight with swords.
Or the way they actually did it was they like set him on fire or something.
Really?
Yeah, and
They set him on fire to see if he could put himself out.
they set Peter on trial, or they set Peter on fire to see, if this is truly a message from God that this is the Holy Land, he'd survive the fire.
Did anyone ever survive that sort of trial? Or was that a pretty sure death sentence?
Probably not. I can't think of any examples.
That's okay. So what happens next?
So,
Or what happens with the siege?
So Arca, they spend a few weeks there. The siege goes nowhere, and they decide, you know what? The road's open to Tripoli, and the reason we're doing this is to take out the Emirate of Tripoli anyway. Let's just go to Tripoli.
Okay, right.
So they go to Tripoli, and the emir has a couple of interesting motivations. One, he's under threat from the Fatimids. You see, the Fatimids are Shia, while the Seljuks are Sunni, and the Fatimids are taking advantage of the Seljuks conflicts to try to take Jerusalem back from the Seljuks and incorporate it back into their Egyptian caliphate. So, and the emir is okay with the Crusaders, but because he still is not really sure if they're Byzantine mercenaries or something else. But he knows for a fact he absolutely hates the Shia, so he's like, hey, I'll give you 500 horses and, just let you pass through and say you took the city if you leave me alone and help and maybe make sure my city does not get captured by the Fatimids. Some sources also say that the emir of Tripoli promised to convert to Christianity if they defeated the Fatimids, but the only source we have on this is the Gesta Francorum, and the emir died before the crusade ended anyway. So anyways, the Crusaders, finally they go to Jerusalem, and the siege of Jerusalem does not last that long. The main interesting thing with this is that by this point, Jerusalem has been taken by the Fatimids. So the Fatimids are like, hey, can you just focus all of your crusading on the Seljuks, and we'll make sure that Christians have pilgrimage rights to Jerusalem? But Baldwin says, no, I don't accept your offer, and continues south and besieges Jerusalem, even though he's now entering a different country. So anyways, they besiege Jerusalem, and finally, at last, Jerusalem is back in Christian hands. They have conquered the city. There's one more Muslim attempt to fight against the Crusaders at Ascalon, but that battle, the Crusaders easily win. By this point, it's pretty clear that the Crusaders have won.
Okay, so the taking of Jerusalem by the Christians or by the Crusaders marks the end of the First Crusade.
Yeah.
And what happens, or is this considered part of the First Crusade, or is this something we discuss in the next one? You can tell me. But what happens with the Crusaders who have taken Jerusalem? Do they leave a force to guard Jerusalem and the rest of them go home? Do they stay there? What happens with this army?
So a lot of people just go home to Europe.
Okay.
Some people, especially Baldwin and some of the other nobles who were on the crusade, stay to set up the Crusader states.
Okay.
They set up the county of Edessa, which is a story all on its own.
Okay.
The Principality of Antioch, the county of Tripoli, and the kingdom of Jerusalem.
Okay.
Baldwin becomes the first king of Jerusalem and gets suzerainty over all the other Crusader states, though in a sense they function sort of independently, even if they unite against any sort of Muslim threat that comes their way.
I understand. Okay, so for the Crusaders then, you would consider the First Crusade to be a success, is that correct? Okay. All right. And are there any other final words you want to say about the First Crusade?
Just one interesting moment with, I think it might have been Baldwin or one of his descendants, but basically Baldwin was coronated in Bethlehem. However, he refused the traditional, golden crown, instead saying, "I shall not wear a crown of iron, where my Savior wore a crown of thorns," and just wore a helmet instead as his crown.
Okay.
And one of
that is a sign of humility.
Yeah.
Okay.
These Crusader states were very successful at the beginning. However, it was very easy to see why they fell. They would need support from Europe to continue, existing due to the fact that the populace had a lot of Muslims in it, and also some Christians who were used to living under Muslim rule.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. If essentially most of the Crusader army went back to Europe, so you have a much smaller army here now ruling over essentially a foreign and most likely hostile population.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and plus the Seljuks, who had at first been confused as to whether they were mercenaries or something else, and just assumed they would all go home. Maybe after all, they're just mercenaries. They start to realize, okay, these are people with religious fervor. We're going to need to think a little more strategically to defeat them, and plus now people were starting to interact more with the Crusaders, and now that the Middle Eastern Muslims had actually come into contact with Western tactics, Western military technology, they were starting to adapt to, because whereas previously...
Is this all still part of the First Crusade?
Or this is just the most direct aftermath.
The aftermath of the First Crusade. Okay.
Yeah. So all of this eventually culminates in a bunch of battles which lead to the Muslim retaking of Jerusalem, which leads to the Second Crusade. And
we'll save that for our next episode. All right, great job, Bastian.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we hope to see you all in our next episode on this Second Crusade.
Yep.